And you were listening to Season 6 of the award-winning Christian Outdoors podcast with your host, Pete Rogers. Welcome, everyone, to Christian Outdoors Podcast. I'm Pete Rogers, your host. Today on Christian Outdoors Podcast, I'm thrilled to have with me a fairly new podcast in our space. They're called the Casting Faith Podcast, and they're hosted by Charlie Griffin and Sean Delaney. Charlie is a UPCI minister with more than 12 years of experience in ministry and Christian education. He's passionate about helping others navigate challenges and grow spiritually. Born in Amarillo, Texas, and raised in Northeast Ohio, his journey from adversity to faith-driven leadership has shaped his mission to equip and uplift others. He's been married for 11 years and is a proud father of 2 daughters. We also have with us Mr. Sean Delaney. Sean is a passionate voice in the faith-based media ministry, co-hosting the Casting Faith podcast with Charlie Griffin. Together, they explore faith, family, and the outdoors, blending real-life stories with biblical insights. Sean's unique perspective is shaped by his diverse experiences, including an FAA drone pilot and founder of Suite 2.38 Media, which is a high-end videography company specializing in aerial footage and professional video production. His company is what powers the visual side of the Casting Faith podcast, bringing high-quality, engaging content to the audience. He's a devoted husband and father of 1 son. Sean is also an avid hunter and fisherman, enjoying the outdoors whenever possible. He has served on the mission field alongside international evangelist Charles Robinette, witnessing firsthand many miracles, both personal and in the lives of others. A survivor of a near-death experience, Sean's faith journey is deeply rooted in the understanding of God's power and grace. With his background in videography ministry and his passion for the outdoors, Sean is committed to sharing his faith and encouraging others to experience God's miracle in their own lives. Please welcome to Christian Outdoors Podcast both Charlie Griffin and Sean Delaney here from the Casting Faith Podcast. All right, everyone, as I said in the introduction today, I have with me the locally famous, but soon to be world famous Casting Faith Podcast hosts, Sean and Charlie. And Sean Delaney and Charlie Griffin, and so that the listeners and watchers know who you are. Sean, raise your hand.
I'm Sean.
Hey, Sean. And Charlie?
I'm Charlie.
That would be the other one. Okay.
Yeah, the other guy.
All right. Thank you guys for joining me here on Christian Outdoors Podcast. I really am looking forward to this show. They have a brand new show, which we just called, Casting Faith Podcast. We're going to get into the details of that and how all that came about. But first, Charlie, why don't you tell us about yourself and who you are, and then we'll go over to Sean and do him as well.
Yeah, so I'm Charlie Griffin. I'm originally from Amarillo, Texas, and I moved here to Ohio when I was just a kid, hence not having the accent. So I've been raised in Northeast Ohio for quite some time now, and been heavily involved in ministry and in our local church at FAC Talmadge, and have served there for many years, specifically in youth ministry, music ministry. And there was just one piece that I felt a burden to, which, Pete, I'm sure you've had this burden as well, is podcasting. I noticed there's millions of podcasts out there promoting all kinds of different things, but there really wasn't much in place for just everyday Christian listening. Mm-hmm. And I'm a preacher, and so I like to preach, I like to teach, I like to get into the Bible, I like to get into all those things, and it all has its place, but I wanted something that somebody could just turn on and listen to and enjoy on the ride home, and maybe not so much feel the weight and pressure of all the other things, because I guess a safe alternative is what I wanted to produce. And so that kind of is how we came up with Casting Faith podcast. We're both avid fishermen and, big into the outdoor things. That's something, that I've been into all my life. Sean's more of a hunter, fisherman. I'm pretty much just a fisherman, but I'm willing to learn. And so Casting Faith was kind of born out of that burden to reach more people in just their everyday life. And so the term casting faith, we all have used. Pete, I'm sure you've said cast faith into a situation before in a message or something like that. But, it's kind of a play on words of casting a line into the water and casting faith into every situation, every daily life. And so that's kind of where this podcast started for.
Okay. All right. Sean?
Yeah. So I grew up in Parkersburg, West Virginia, and moved up to Ohio, 2010. And I grew up on a 25-ish acre cow farm, old cow farm. I grew up hunting.
An old cow farm. So y'all
Old
only
cow
raised
farm.
old
There weren't
cows.
any cows there. Yeah.
You only raised old cows.
Old cows. There you go.
Aged beef.
There you go.
Just want to know. Just trying to get clarity. Right.
Already aged.
Right. Yeah, the grandmas, not the calves. Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I grew up hunting there, just sometimes off the porch. And that was just kind of my lifestyle growing up, and fishing the streams up in the mountains in West Virginia, like the Elk River and some of the creeks up there for trout, and all the local ponds and stuff for bass. But moved up here and found out about steelhead trout in the Great Lakes, and was hooked as soon as I got into that. Just rainbow trout that are just extremely massive. They're native to the Pacific Northwest,
Right.
and they brought them over decades ago, and now we have them in the Great Lakes, and they're stocked like by the hundreds of thousands every year. So it's
So
a
it's
really
not
great fishery.
If my biology is correct in my memory, a steelhead is a rainbow trout that goes out into the ocean and then
Yes.
comes back into the fresh water to spawn. But yours are in the Great Lakes, so they're just, it's not a true steelhead. It's kind of a hybrid, or is it a
Yeah.
stock, not a
So-
wild steelhead?
Yeah, that's a big debate that all the steelhead fishermen have, with mainly with the Pacific Northwest guys. I guess the correct term, yes, they run out to sea to saltwater, and a lot of the argument is if they're not going to saltwater for the summer, then they're not true steelhead. However, we have salmon in the Great Lakes as well, so that's also a fish that runs out to saltwater. So if those aren't salmon, then these aren't steelhead. So that's kind of the back rebuttal on the other end of it.
Well, a comparison for me down here in the South would be the striped bass, which is a saltwater fish, but also lives in freshwater, landlocked lakes, but they're sterile in the landlocked lakes. They can't reproduce because of the way that they are, right? And so we have to stock them. So it's a saltwater fish that is in the lakes here in South Carolina and a lot of the Southeast, and actually is spread all over the country now. The striped bass, one of my favorite fisheries, just because they fight so well and they get so big. So I understand what you're saying. It's it is the same thing, but it's not. So we'll put a dotted line.
It is a big debate.
And a dotted line salmon. So what kind of is it here in the South? I put the L in salmon. Right.
I say salmon. Yeah.
You say salmon. Salmon.
I'm also from West Virginia, so I mean,
SAMMON, salmon. Right. And it's more nasal too, like the bluegrass is. Salmon.
It's like saying water. They live in the water.
Water, yeah. Better than the water.
Yeah.
Water. So I will. I've only caught one steelhead, and it was in the Northwest, and it was only about 15 inches long. And my buddy I was with said, I said, I'm going to take a picture. He said, no, take a picture of that little fish. We're going to catch more.
Baby.
Fish we caught. It was the only fish we caught. So I was glad I got a picture of my one steelhead, right?
I've heard it's a lot harder to fish the Northwest than it is the Great Lakes because they're not stocked like that in the Northwest. They're native. So
yeah.
The numbers are lower.
As I said before we started recording, I was up in your area just last week, speaking in Lineville, Pennsylvania, and but I rode up to Lake Erie because I'd seen all the Great Lakes except Erie and Huron, and I wanted to see that. And I saw the ice fishermen, right?
Yeah,
and I just got to ask, I don't understand those people.
Yeah, I don't either.
Understand those people. I was going to ask if y'all were ice fishermen before.
No,
I steer clear of that. Actually, we've been stuck at home because everything's locked up, and so. I now the rivers are starting to break up, but now they're ice jammed and flooded. So
so you still can't fish for a while.
Still can't fish for a while.
Yeah,
a couple weeks.
Yeah, I was talking to one of the ice fishermen between services there, and he said, "Man, you just need to try it." I said, "This is what I don't understand. Is in the summer you get in your boat and you go around and you're either trolling for salmon or for lake trout or something like that, or you're casting the banks or you're hitting, structure, whatever. And in the winter, You go on one of the largest lakes in the world, and you drill an 8-inch hole, and you sit over it hoping a fish will come by.
Just
Why don't you do that
and
in the
it's
summer?
daily commute.
Why don't you just anchor off in the summer and just sit there and hope a fish comes by? I mean, it's the same. I don't understand. I
Not
don't.
productive.
No, I don't. It's 15 degrees, and you're in a little tent and sitting over a hole in the ice, hoping.
Yeah, I think the risk factor there for me is just, it's ice. You're standing on ice, and they say certain width or inches of ice, but that would make me pretty nervous.
Yeah.
No matter what I was pulling through.
Yeah,
we were fishing.
It had to be at least a foot thick for me to walk on it.
Yeah. We were fishing recently before we started talking about polar vortexes on one of our episodes. Back in 2014, we had a major polar vortex that caused everything to freeze. People were throwing boiling water in the air, and we're like, that was crazy. And then it happened again, like weeks after, and we're like, great, we're never talking about that again. So there's no wood around here to knock on, but hopefully we're not going to get any more of that. But we went out right before that, and nobody was out on the river. We fished the Grand River a lot up near Paynesville for these steelhead, and we went out and we trekked through, I don't know, what was it, like 2 miles, something like that. And we were knee deep in snow.
It was 48 inches of snow that day, the night before.
And we're like, cool, we have it to ourselves. We get there and it's just like ice. Most of it's just ice shelves. And we stood on it to bank through, and it was not a foot deep.
You stood on it.
I stood on it.
I fell through it.
I stood on it, but Sean,
I'm much bigger.
Yeah. He falls through. And it was just so funny because he went from like standing, and I looked over and he just right through. And I'm like, now imagine being on a lake.
Yeah.
And that happening. We were in wadable water, so it wasn't that big of a deal. He got out just fine. So we only caught one fish he caught one fish that day. Of those thousands of steelhead that get poured in, he's probably caught 30 this year?
Around 30, yeah.
And I'm about 4. So, that's the dynamic right now.
We know who the better fisherman is.
And the better hunterman. Or hunter.
Yeah.
and the better hunterman, whatever that is.
Yeah, that's a new word. Let's put that on a t-shirt.
I'm the hunterman. Yeah, I don't understand the ice fisherman at all. I just don't. But if you're an ice fisherman listening to this, my hat's off to you. I hope you take a buddy heater out there with you, and are bundled up to the core, because I don't know. I don't know how you pass the time. I don't know. I don't know. But
maybe they're listening to these podcasts.
That's probably what it is. Tune into Christian Outdoors and Casting Faith podcast.
Yeah.
If you have insomnia, we're your guys, right? All right. So you were, Charlie, you were thinking about podcasting and how to do it and what you wanted to do, but how did you decide on bringing in the outdoors with it? Just like I did, I brought the outdoors and faith together. How did you decide on that?
Well, it's a big part of it is just like part of who I am. Growing up, my grandparents raised me, and you'd hear about this on our podcast, a little bit of my testimony. But growing up, we didn't make a lot of money. My grandfather was a truck driver. He would be gone, and my grandma would raise me and my cousins and my sister. So there were 6 kids in the house. And a lot of times it was 6 kids get out of the house. That we talked about this phrase that's kind of a bygone word now. It's called the latchkey kids. And we were the last of the latchkey kids. And so we were told, get out, go, come back home, and I'm thankful for my childhood, but a lot of that was spent at the cabin in Pennsylvania on a creek or a crick, depending on where you're from. And we would fish and we would fish and we would canoe. And, a lot of my vacations were at that cabin fishing and being outside and outdoors, and the peace that you get from that, which any outdoorsman knows what I'm talking about. That peace that you get outside is something valuable. And I think it brings you closer to God. And I know that's a big part of why you do what you do. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's just a natural segue there into a lot of the things that God wants us to learn is found in nature. And so it was an easy thing for me because it's just so natural to talk about. I love fishing. I'm going to talk about fishing. Some of my junior high students that I get to teach, every Sunday make fun of me because a lot of my sermons have some fishing metaphors in there and some fishing stories, and I got those for days, and so does every fisherman, and that's a big part of what our podcast is. But a lot of it's a play on words, and so we're not locked into just outdoor topics, but it's just natural for us to talk about because that's what we're into. And so that's kind of how we landed on it. It's just natural. And I think people want that. They want that natural conversation that, that is authentic. And so that's how we kind of landed on it. And it's been great so far. We've seen major successes and some pitfalls, but we're enjoying it and it's fun. And we're grateful to be with you today. And so it's exciting to be on a podcast like yours that kind of shares the same values with outdoors and Christianity.
Yeah.
And so I think that's super important to have that available for men and women who are looking for alternatives to the garbage that's out there to listen to, because we know it, the world's full of it, and it's hard to avoid. And so that's a big point of why we're doing what we're doing. And we put a lot of humor into it, so we try to make it lighthearted and fun too. So.
Or things that you think are funny anyway. Right?
Yeah. I'm sure somebody's laughing at me.
Well, okay. Right.
Maybe not with me, but at me.
So, a lot of packs, obviously I do mine alone for the most part. I do have a guy who helps me co-host from time to time. I mostly interview people, but you two tend to do more of just the two of you, correct? And then interview people occasionally.
We like to have guests on. This too. You're 300 some episodes deep. There's a wealth of education that's had when you have guests on. And so that's a big part of this too, is, we know that we're going to learn a lot through this. And we love we've had, I don't know, 5 or 6 on. So it's we'll have like a couple guests and then we'll have some standalone episodes. And so it's always fun. We're never all alone, but we want to show that no matter what you're from, whether you're an outdoorsman, or we've had some authors on, we've had, some ministers on. We had an IT tech guy on who's my cousin, doing some great things in the IT world with translation and AI and getting the gospel to more people through that tool that is kind of controversial. And so we have, try to open that net a little bit, if you will, and get some more voices out there.
Yeah. And that's important, which I've learned as well, being 6 years into it, is that if you just stay on one path, then you're going to bore some people. They're going to get sick of hearing the same thing. So you got to mix it up a little bit, and that's why I went with outdoors, because it's everything outdoors. It's not just hunting and fishing, which I do the majority of, right? But like I had a show a few weeks ago of a couple who's been living in an RV full time for 3 years, and I'm like, well, that's gonna be. And that show blew up.
That's awesome.
I mean, I was like, who would have known? It's amazing how God can do that kind of stuff. But anything outdoors, even if I don't do it or have never thought about it, then I think it's great. I think it's awesome just because you're outdoors. I love the outdoors. I love Jesus. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. So, Sean, your turn. What is it about this collaboration that you and Charlie have that makes it work?
I think that
Assuming
Charlie, it definitely works. Charlie has the mind, the passion, the drive, the burden for the podcast. And we've talked about it for several years of starting it with another guy at the church as well. And one day I don't even know how it started, but we were just like, let's just do it. And we gathered some stuff up together. We actually used these drum mics that are back behind us for our first couple episodes. And it sounded terrible, but start with what you had. We heard one guy say a C turned in is better than an A not turned in, or something like that.
Yeah.
And so we just started with what we had, and then God had blessed me with we ran into some things where we were able to just buy better equipment, and we upgraded everything pretty quickly. I think we're probably too far ahead of the curve for where we're at on episode numbers, but I just was in the place that I was able to do that at the time, and we use my basement as a studio for now. And it works. And I enjoy the most, what I get from it is just conversation. And it's nice to have people in my home. It's enjoyable to have people in my home, fellowship, talk, and that's what I like about it the most.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm the same. I really like getting to meet all the different people and hearing their stories and stuff. And you just said something to trigger a different direction in my brain, if I may.
Yeah.
And that is, there may be some fledgling podcasters out there who are thinking about starting their show. So you mentioned your equipment, what you started with. I did the same thing. I bought something on Amazon that I could afford, and
Mhm.
started with a Focusrite, and now I have a Rode Roadcaster Pro.
Yep.
And I mean, and you start. Don't
Mhm.
don't. In other words, think of it. I'm gonna use a baseball analogy. Guys that get drafted are some of the best in the world, but they don't start in the major leagues. They
Right.
go to the minor leagues and they work their way up to the major leagues. And I don't, I'm probably still in the minor leagues, right, compared to some of the big guys out there. But the point is that you get better every time you do it. Every
Sure.
episode you get better, and you think, "Golly, how can I make this a little bit better? How can this be? Just let's try
Yeah.
this software. Let's try this lighting. Let's try this microphone. And if anybody's out there who's interested in starting it, I'm more than willing to share what little I know to help you get started in yours, because it's a big learning curve, because I am
Mhm.
not a tech guy. I don't have that knowledge that Sean has on the video and the audio stuff. I had to just learn it as I went, and I know I could still do a lot better. But just I've told people a lot who are thinking about podcasting is prepare, do your homework, right? But don't think you have to be an Aaron Judge or a Shohei Ohtani, a baseball analogy, and I'm a baseball guy,
Yeah.
right? Don't think you have to be there to start.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Start with what you have and do what you know, and don't quit,
Yeah.
and don't quit. I mean,
That's the biggest thing we see is consistency
Yeah.
is pays off, whether it's good or not. Like you said, every time uh we put out an episode, I critique everything about it. Like this last one that we put, I think episode 17, the audio, I put too much compressor on it. Something happened weird with the audio and it messed it all up. And he said he didn't even really notice it, but it's just like it's a headache to me to hear that episode.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's awful.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
and they're not all going to be home runs, and some of them will just be base hits, and some of them will just be there. But people count on it, and so that's
yeah,
part of it. It'd be like, not to say that we're a church anything, but we're part of the church, so I guess we are the church. It'd be like saying, well, we're not having church this Sunday. The audio equipment's not just right, and so we're just going to close the door. That wouldn't make any
No.
sense. And so consistent people rely on it to
yeah.
come all the time, and when
They
they
do.
need it. And so that was the biggest thing for me, is that if we're going to do this, we're going to do it consistently, and it will be faithful to this, and God will honor that. And man, he's honored it. And
Yeah.
it's so cool. And we're just at the beginning. And so this is a unique dynamic. We look up to somebody like you who's 300 episodes deep, over 6 million listeners or downloads. That's incredible. And so we look at that, and we're thinking, well, that's our trajectory. And cool
Mhm.
thing with you, Pete, is that, and to echo kind of what you said, is that, a rise, the saying is, a rising tide lifts all sails. And so if people are out there wanting to start something like this, to be a Christian voice or a voice for or their field,
Mhm.
do it.
Yeah,
There's harvest is plenty, so,
right.
somebody else starting it doesn't hurt. It just builds a greater community. And so
Exactly
that's
right.
what we're excited. Our listeners are going to come listen to you. Your listeners are going to come listen to us. And that's incredible. That's fellowship, and it's building a great community. And that's a cool thing.
Yeah.
It is. It is. And I had somebody tell me early on, when I was like, I only got this many downloads. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And he said, are you doing it for the downloads, or are you doing it for that one?
Mm,
I was
Mhm.
like,
that's good.
well, put me in my place.
Yeah,
And
that's encouraging.
that's exactly right. Just for that one,
Yeah.
and to your point about consistency, that is the main thing that I tell uh, people starting a podcast. And I approach it like this, having been a pastor, is doesn't matter what happened that week, Sunday's coming, and you better have a sermon ready.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
doesn't matter if you've had 3 funerals and 6 people in the hospital and it's Saturday night or Sunday morning at 1 a.m. You better have a sermon ready on Sunday morning. It better be well prepared and well presented. And so I approach it like that: is every week, without fail, release an episode.
Yeah.
Every week without fail. And I've had well, how do you do that? Well, you record in advance before you ever start. You get 10 or 15 episodes in the bank before you start. And then they'll catch up to you. You can bet on that.
Oh, yeah, we're there right now. So
they will catch up, but at least you had a little bit of breathing room and you can work with it. And I've also told people is you don't have to do one every week. If you decide I'm going to do one every other week, then your listeners get used to that. And that's when they're looking for it. You know, there's some who do 2 a week. I don't know these people if they can do 3 or 4 a week. I don't understand it. I mean, that is a lot of work. You know, that is a lot of. They obviously have a staff of people that are helping them because you know how much work it is to find people and then schedule it and get it recorded and then the editing and then everything that goes into it. But it is a joy. I like what you said, Charlie, is that we're not competing against each other in the Christian space. We're helping each other, and we're helping the believer and the non-believer to grow, to draw closer to Christ. We hope. So it's not a competition. It's not a competition at all. How does your show actually come together? If you understand how I mean that.
Yeah, a lot of it's through. So a big part of this is this. I think we touched on it a little bit, but one of the biggest things with this is the fellowship that we get from it. Sean's one of my close friends, but I haven't known him my whole life. He moved to Talmadge, which is our area, to our church just a couple of years ago, and we talked about steelhead fishing and stuff. And I had been, it's funny now, but I had been fishing for 6 years, specifically trying to catch steelhead. Normally crappie fishing, bass fishing, catfishing. You know, they'd ask me, what are you fishing for? I'd say, whatever's biting. That's what I wanted to fish for. And then I got introduced to this steelhead and this rainbow trout. And for 6 years, I tried at Conneaut trying to catch a steelhead on some spoons. And that was the limit of my knowledge of the fish. That's all I knew is just, you know, around this time, go and try. And in that 6 years, I hooked into 2 fish. And then I met Sean. And he had some knowledge that I did not have. And he told me some ways and showed me some ways and showed me some places, the right places. And, you know, that first year I limited out a couple of times. And I think I caught 8 to 12 fish in that first year of fishing with him. And from that came a great friendship, you know, just serving together in ministry at church and also fishing. And so a lot of our podcast comes from this relationship that we have, our everyday conversations and friendship. This fellowship is, you know, he's a close friend of mine. I'm actually a teacher at his son's school, so I get to teach his son.
Yep.
And so I'm close with his family. And, you know, we just talk everyday events. We schedule guests that we want to talk with and learn from. And it just, a lot of it comes naturally. And then we try to touch on current events respectfully and also funny stories, funny fishing stories that we've had, you know, falling through the ice and slipping in our waders. I've taken a swim a couple times fishing for these fish. And Sean, I experienced his first fall into the river. But yeah, so a lot of these episodes are crafted that way. We obviously pray, you know, God give us a message to give, you know, but also a lot of it is just natural conversation and things that we want to know about or interested in, and things that, you know, in everyday life, casting faith. We want to cast faith in these situations. You know, how was your day? Well, it was this, and that. Well, you can still cast faith in that day. You know, things aren't always going to be great. Sometimes they're going to be great. Sometimes they're not, but there's a way to cast faith into that. And so the principle and concept behind it is for us to be able to give that faith to somebody who might not be having such a great day. Yeah. And say, hey, you know, I know it's tough, but listen to this. There's some faith in it. Then there's a Bible lesson in this. And so a lot of it is banter. A lot of it's stories. A lot of it is current events, and the Bible. We try to weave the Bible into that and give people that bread that is so important.
Right. Right. As a podcaster, I've been asked this a lot, so I'm gonna ask you, what's your ultimate goal for your show?
Man,
No,
we've
Charlie, I'm gonna let Sean answer that.
That's fine.
The ultimate goal for the show for me is probably going to be different than for Charlie, but my ultimate goal is that I can just have a conversation with a bunch of people and get to know others and let other people into our world, really. And it's fun. Like, we have district events and stuff in district, as in Ohio, for our church organization. And we'll go and see people from all over the state, and they'll be like, "Oh, hey, then make a joke about something that we talked about on the podcast." And it's like, so seeing that, it was just kind of like, that's really fun to let people in for me. And it's fun to go around all over the state so far, and like, people banter us back on what we talked about, or like the turkeys or whatever we're talking about, that whatever in that episode. But so the ultimate goal is just really connection and letting people in to our world. And I think that I see and do some neat things, and get to experience some neat things, and it's fun to share that. So
Okay. All right, Charlie.
Yeah, we're not too far off. I wouldn't say that they're different. I keep hitting my knee on this table. We're not too different in that aspect. For me, this whole thing is, we touched on it a little bit earlier, is getting God's word into everyday life, and offering that alternative to people. And so, whether we ever make real money off of this or not is not the objective. That would be nice. But primarily it's just about bringing people good content.
Yeah.
And because there's not enough of it, and passionate about it, because serving in youth ministry, you see a lot of students who struggle just because of the stuff that they ingest, because of the stuff that they're watching, because of the stuff that they're listening to, because of the influence. We live in an influencer culture, and so there's so much out there competing for people's minds. People doing it. And so
Right. And or intend to happen, but it's just my nature is I want it to be something that you can listen to with your kids in the car.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, in the outdoor space, there's a lot of people who are just profane,
yeah.
and
Mhm.
you don't need to be to talk about hunting and fishing. It's like they think they have to in order to be in,
Mhm.
but if I'm listening with, of course, all my kids are grown, but even now, um, that wasn't necessary. Why did you do that?
Right.
I mean, it just ruins the whole thing for me and for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so having a family friendly show that's clean, and we're not putting people down. Hold on a minute.
Yeah.
There we go. And we're not putting people down, and we're not being off color. We're not using any bad language. We're just having a good time talking about what we love in the outdoors and about our faith. Then I think it's an example for a lot
Mhm.
of other things that says that, hey, this can be done. I saw a thing on Instabook today. Um, that real popular comedian now, Nate, what's his last name?
Argotzi.
Yeah, I can't say it. Yeah, Nate Bargatze. They were saying that he is by far the most popular comedian right now, and he has never used a cuss word in any of his acts.
Yeah.
He's just dry, and he made $82 million last year
Yeah.
stand-up comedy without saying a single word that you could take your whole family there and be just fine.
Mhm. Yeah.
And it's just everyday stuff. And I think that's a perfect example of what we're saying here is we want a family friendly show that is uplifting to everybody that can listen to it.
Sure.
Right. Again, for all ages and both genders.
Mhm.
Yep.
That's both.
2 of them. Yeah. So that's the goal for us, I think, is just the fellowship that we get out of it, and offering that to people. I think too, we've always talked about it. And I had a year last year, everybody went through. It's funny we say the pandemic, and that was what, 5 years ago now, right? And
Mhm.
so we
Hard
all
to
had a
believe it was 5 years ago, isn't
I
it?
know, but we all went through that time where we just had to sit in, and personally, I lost so much during that. I lost my grandma who raised me. I lost my uncle, my aunt, my other uncle. We went through so much loss and trial through that time, and it was just like this holding period. And when we came out of that, things just turned on with ministry, different things. I got my licensure, and I had all these ideas of things that I wanted to do, and one of them was write a book. And I was able to accomplish all of this in just 2 years. And last year, God said, "Go, do it, do these things." And I did it, and we started things, and it was amazing to see how quickly, when you get that word "go" and "do," and you
Mhm.
do it, how quickly things turn on and how God just starts to take over. And so the podcast was part of that. Is we just said, "Okay, let's do it." And then we started, and it just started rolling, and we've grown pretty well for it being 3 months old,
Mhm.
but I was able to write my book, finish that, and also start the podcast, just by doing. And so
Right.
to those people who are out there and have those things that they feel that are God things to do, just do it.
Yeah.
Get that word. God wants you to be a creator. He wants you to do something with the abilities that he's given you.
Right.
And that kind of was pushed through all of those hard times,
Mhm.
just to
And it's
go and
okay
accomplish.
it's okay to be scared a little bit. It's okay to be a little uneasy. It's okay to be like, "God, I don't know if I can do this or not." Right? That's okay.
Mhm.
But just
Mhm.
lean on him,
Yep.
and he'll show you the way, and he'll show you the way. That's awesome. So, when you listen to Christian Outdoors, that we talk about our guests, and then we ask them to share their faith story in one manner or another, as much as they're comfortable. So, Sean, I want to start with you. And
Okay.
the way I do this is that some people just go straight to their testimony, which is when I got saved. But what I prefer is the whole faith journey. Is, for a lot of people didn't grow up in church and they came to there later and then they entered a relationship with Christ. Maybe they fell away and came back. If you don't mind sharing your faith story as much as you're
Sure.
comfortable,
Sure.
and then we'll get Charlie's version.
Yeah. So I was born and raised in the church, not literally, obviously. There was a hospital. It's not that far in West Virginia. So born and raised in the church, and my dad was a preacher. My uncle was a pastor, and just this long history of the church and my family. So I was a pew baby and grew up under the pews and rolling around. And so, but there's a struggle with that. Um, Being raised, for me, there was being raised in that culture. It just, everything became normal. It's day to day. It's what we do. Everything is church, and that you don't really experience the outside. I say outside it. You don't experience the life of sin necessarily, although there's sin everywhere. But so as I grew older in my teen years, my teen years, 17, 18, I started like hanging out with the wrong crowd, and um, which unfortunately it's a sad story, but my entire youth group is the kids that I was hanging out with, and we would go do things that we shouldn't on the weekends, and be in places that we shouldn't be in, and but still be there on Sunday morning for church and Wednesday night for church. And I turned 18, and I thought, man, I'm in West Virginia. We live on this 25-acre piece of property. There's trails galore through the woods. I mean, you could take off in West Virginia in the woods and ride for 100 miles, and nobody would even know like that you're on their property. It's just how it is down there. So naturally I was wanting to get a four-wheeler for myself. My dad had one, but I wanted one, and I wanted the shiny new one that could go fast, and a race four-wheeler because I had friends that raced, and so I wanted to be cool like them. And so I went to a Suzuki store, and a friend worked there, owned it. His dad owned the store, and they signed me up for a credit card, and I was approved at 18 years old for $8,000 with no credit history besides a $300 JCPenney credit card. It was insane. Why would you give an 18-year-old that much money? It's wild to me, still to this day.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I ended up getting a four-wheeler and just messing around. I didn't even know how to drive the thing. Tried to load it in my truck. It's the first time I ever had any experience with a manual transmission. So I was out in the parking lot at the dealership for about 45 minutes trying to get it up the ramp into my truck. And that ended up, somebody else had to come do it for me. So I get home, mess around with it, whatever. And then maybe like it was October of 2007, maybe 4 months after that, after I bought it, me and some friends from school, me and some friends from church wanted to go out and ride after church in between services. We had 2 services, morning and night. And I told my dad I was loading the four-wheeler up because I wanted to go sell it, because my dad would not have been okay with me going to ride with friends. And he was mad that I bought it in the first place. So I lied to my father. Hey, I'm going to sell it. Somebody at church wants to see it. And he was pastoring or assistant pastor at another church at the time. So he wasn't going where I was going at the time. So anyway, we get there and load up after Sunday morning service, and we go out and ride. And we were riding for maybe 2 or 3 hours and started to head back, and just racing my friends in the backwoods of, it was actually in Cutler, Ohio. It wasn't even in West Virginia. And I just flipped end over end over on the four-wheeler coming down the hill, and it rolled over my back, and then it hit a tree root and just came down and T-boned me right in the back with the front grab bar. And it was lights out right there. It cut my aorta from my heart. It cut my spleen, punctured both lungs, it initially took out 95% of one kidney and 100% of the other. They were able to save the one kidney, but they had to get rid of the other one. It broke every single rib in my body. So all the ribs were just like grenades to my internal organs and stuff. And the doctors met my parents that night in the hospital and said, prepare yourself. Your son's not going to make it through the night. We're flying him down to Charleston, and they're going to have to take care of him down there, but he's not going to make it. And so they get down there. We're in surgery, and they had to do an emergency thoracotomy. And the National Medicine Library, whatever it's called, has a survival rate of that particular surgery with a blunt force trauma emergency thoracotomy somewhere around like 1.4% survival rate or something like that. So I had like basically a 99% chance of dying.
So what is that, sir? What is that thoracotomy you're talking about?
Yeah, so they cut below the 5th rib, and they go in, they spread your ribs open, and it's a last ditch effort to save anything that happened to your heart or other things in there. But in my cases, the aorta was cut from the heart. So the supplier, whatever, they had to get in there and fix that. I bled out, and they pumped enough blood into me to keep like 10 people alive or something. I don't know the numbers of liters or whatever, but I made it through the night. They told my parents the next day. They said, hey, he did make it, but he's probably not going to be able to walk or function ever again, because he has a TBI, the traumatic brain injury, all this stuff. And long story short, I was in there for 54 days. I was in a coma, medically induced coma.
So excuse me. So you were not wearing a helmet?
I was wearing a helmet.
Okay, you were with it. You still had it.
My friends made me put it on. They're like, "You're not riding here unless you wear a helmet." So
okay, good. I'm getting that for the listeners and
yes,
for the safety reasons. Okay.
Even with the helmet on, all this happened. So I couldn't imagine I would have lived through it if I didn't have a helmet on.
Right.
So
you made it through the night.
Yeah. Long story short, 54 days in there, medically induced coma. And the only thing that I came out of it with, besides missing organs, was I had a seizure in there that was trauma induced from the TBI. And that's what I take that medicine daily still, is seizure medicine. And that's what I got from that accident. So like the faith journey in this moment, like I said, I grew up in the church. I didn't really know the outside world. It wasn't until this accident happened, I was forced to stay at home for a year and not allowed to work. I wasn't allowed to drive. And I had to figure things out for myself in that dark, lonely place. And it wasn't until that moment when I was 18 years old, jobless, laid up in bed for a year, that I found God for myself, like per se, and really leaned in because I needed God. I couldn't do this with my friends. I couldn't do it with my family. Nobody else could give me the peace and the hope that God could give me in that dark season of my life. So I came out of that and landed on my feet a year later, and just was thriving in the Lord. And God called me to move to Ohio, and met my wife, and we've been married since 2012, and just been up here in Ohio since 2010, but just serving. And so I am in youth ministry as well, just as a helper. I'm not a preacher or a speaker by any means. But I do videography. I have a videography business, and I play drums and percussion and help the band and music and stuff for our church. So, yeah.
Wow. I got a couple of questions that I'd like to ask.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the listener and what questions they may have. When you said God called me to Ohio, what does that mean?
So it was.
Did your phone ring and it said God? You say, hey,
Hello?
hello.
So
guy.
in that.
Oh, move to Ohio.
Yeah.
Be a little more specific.
Yes, sir.
The whole state or where?
So in that dark season when I was seeking God for myself and spending countless hours in prayer, I just in my spirit, I just felt an unction of the Lord, just that he didn't necessarily say go to Ohio. I just felt God calling me to a different place. Basically saying, in my spirit, I could feel this, God saying, there's more for you. I have more for you. I saved you from all of this for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And now it was my turn to dig in and see, okay, what is that? Mm-hmm. And so the way it happened was, my only wife, my wife came down to visit some mutual friends. Yes. Some mutual friends. And somehow we connected and we started talking just as friends. We had no intention of dating at that time. Like I was 18 years old, and she was probably 16. I think she was 16. I was 19 at this time. So it's a year after the accident, and just as friends, and we started texting, and then I felt like God saying, go to Ohio, like go up there in that area is where I want you.
That's where she was.
Yes, she is from Northeast Ohio. And that's how I landed here.
And you were down there, and like a lot of men, we go to where the women are, and we say, I can't tell you how many men I've talked to that say, I ended up here because this is where my wife's family's from, or this is where my wife was. And it's like, okay, I get it.
Yeah, so that's how that.
So what's your wife's name?
Transpired. Her name is Anna.
So Anna called you to Ohio.
Well, yes, in a way. In a way.
But you knew God. All right. And yes. And seriously.
And it was probably, so that wasn't the final place where God wanted me to land. I'll say that. Okay. And so I didn't know this at the time. I know it now. We've been married 13 years. And So I didn't really know this until 6 years ago that wasn't my final landing place where God wanted me. We were serving. Her dad's a pastor. We were serving under him. We were the music pastors of that church, and God just again just one day I was sitting in the parking lot at my job after work and just praying, God, I need you to. I felt like there was a ceiling on my spirituality per se, like I don't, for lack of better words, like I can't grow any. I feel limited, or I can't grow anymore. I'm investing prayer, fasting, all the things, and I feel limited. And God's, I just gave my heart to God in that moment, saying, God, I want to go higher. I want to feel your presence. I want to be near to you. I want to do your will.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, change something, make something change, with no intentions of leaving my father-in-law's church and no ill intentions of anything really. And it was 2 months later, somehow I ended up with me and my wife ended up visiting the church that we serve in now, just on a Sunday night after we had served that morning. We went and visited the church we're at, and God, in that moment, it was a service that was super impactful for me and for my wife as well. And we looked at each other on the way home, and it was an hour drive home, and we said, we can't go back from this experience. God is drawing us together both to this church, and we have to go. So we dropped everything. Did we do it the right way? No. We hurt a lot of feelings. We burnt some bridges unintentionally, and we were young. I say we were young. That was only like 6 years ago. But if we could do that over, we would definitely do it different. But now we're just thriving. God is so good. He's blessed us beyond our imagination's capabilities. So it's just been an amazing, I would say incredible, but God is totally credible, so he's not incredible.
Right.
Just an amazing God that we serve, and he has just taken, from the time when I was 18 until now I'm 30, I'll be 37 in 2 weeks. It's taken that long to really come to a place where I feel like I'm semi-rooted and know that I'm serving God for myself.
Right.
Growing up in the church, like I said, go back to the story, the beginning of the story. Just, I didn't know God for myself until that accident started, and that was the start of my journey for myself. So,
Does Anna serve in the church as well, or does she work elsewhere? Or
she works out. She doesn't serve in the church right now. She's doing other things. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And you got some youngins too, right?
Yep. We have one son. He's he'll be 12 this summer.
Oh wow.
That's good. He's 11.
Is his voice changing yet? That's going to be
not quite. He did join the youth group, and it's kind of scary.
Oh my gosh, it is so funny. It's not funny, Dad. Yeah, actually, yes, it is. It really is. It's hilarious, actually.
I don't understand half the words he says anymore. This generation alpha language is odd.
It is. It really is. All right, Charlie, your turn.
Yeah. So I grew up in the church, but I had a bit of a different start. And I guess 1992. And like I said, I'm from Amarillo, Texas. You know the country song, Amarillo Skies? So it's near the Panhandle, but Borger, Texas is the place where I was born. And my whole family lived out there at that time. But 1992 was a very different time in that medical advancement wasn't what it is today, and same with technology. Things are rapidly increasing. But for my mom, when she was pregnant with me, it was a complicated pregnancy. And I was born 3 months early, and I weighed 1 pound. And up until this point, this year, I didn't really know this whole story. And my mom shared this with me, and she gave me permission to share this. But the doctors told her to abort me.
Mhm.
I know that's a heated topic, and a lot of opinions out there, but the doctors told her that the chances of me living were so small because of the complications that were there. And not only that, but if she were to carry out this pregnancy, she would not survive because of the advancement at that time wasn't as
Right.
big as it is today. And so she didn't tell anybody this, but she just carried on through the pregnancy. I think I have some notes here, but there was 1.3 million abortions reported in that year in the U.S. alone back then, and that number is just skyrocketed today.
The whole topic right there, whole show.
Yeah, it's a whole nother show, and I'm gonna be mindful of the time and all of that. But they told her to terminate, and she said no, and she didn't tell anybody this because she wasn't sure. She was really young when she had me, and she didn't really tell everybody. My dad and my grandpa were truck drivers, and they were not actually around when I was born. They were out on the road, but she kind of just talked to the Lord and was suffering silently with this situation, the weight of this situation. And she told the Lord, if you give me this baby, I'll trust you that you'll see us through this, and I will give him to you. Which, we both know a Bible character that has a similar story involved in this. But she basically prayed that prayer, and the doctors were really upset about this. They really pushed her even way back then to just terminate. It's the best outcome if you do this. Not to be graphic, but they were skeptical, but they agreed to try and just try this pregnancy through. And she ended up on medical bed rest, and they actually had to sew her cervix shut because you know how waters break. Hers was just a slow leak throughout the entire pregnancy. And so that caused infection, that caused so many different things. And it was a really rare and risky procedure that they did. I'm not sure what it's called, but they did that to try and keep the pregnancy going, because the worst case scenario is that you're born 3 months early because you're not fully developed. All kinds of issues could happen, and it was already a complicated thing. And something happened. This is a long story short. Something happened where it did fail. That sewing of the cervix failed, which was a really bad thing for this, and it basically sent her into labor. And she was put in the hospital, admitted, and put on complete bed rest for 6 weeks of lying flat on a table, unable to get up, unable to have too many visitors. And she had 2 little kids at home, my sisters, that she couldn't see during this time. And she told me it felt like her body was failing her. It was a constant stream of doctors reminding her, hey, there's a way out. You can just terminate and we can get you back. He's not going to survive. This is not worth it. You're killing yourself trying to let this happen. There's no shame in this. The likelihood is so against you. And she prayed every day through this, and she kept that promise. She felt that the Lord, God talks in many different ways, and she felt the Lord tell her that I have this under control, and I have a plan for him, and I have a plan for you. And so she's hearing all these words from the doctors. She's dealing with the current circumstance that doesn't look good, that all of the people and all of the circumstance, that current moment is saying, this is all bad, everything's going wrong. And it was all bad and things were going wrong, but God gave her a word. And she clung to that word, and she would pray every day that prayer. And they just told her, if he's born now, he won't survive. If he's born now, he won't survive. And if he does survive, he will never be normal. Now, that part they might have right. I'm kind of like, not normal, just saying, disclaimer.
Kind of picked up on that.
You can't catch fish is what they
Well,
say.
don't say it, but you open the door. Okay.
He'll wear his hat backwards, and
that's right. And fishing challenge, right? We got that.
But they expected so many developmental delays. He won't last very long. He may be a vegetable. He might not. It's just this is pointless. And like I said, her water broke, and that sent her into labor. So that cervix sewing failed. And it was a terrible situation. The worst case scenario was happening in this moment, and she went into something called a dry birth, which is exactly as terrible as it sounds. And her blood pressure bottomed out when this happened, and her heart rate was crashing, and my heart rate was crashing. So both of us, because of this, instant moment, were dying in the hospital bed. Because I was alive at the moment, so was she. But the worst case scenario happened, and our heart rates crashed, and the doctors didn't think either one of us were going to make it, and they made everybody leave the room. It was this whole scene for her, and in that moment, my mom said something. Her last words before she blacked out was Jesus. She didn't say anything else. That's all she could muster, is that word, Jesus. And something changed in that moment. When she said that name, she blacked out. But something happened when she called the name Jesus. My heart rate went up just enough for the doctors to have a window to do what they needed to do to deliver me. And they delivered me and rushed me into the to the NICU. And from there, my mom said everything went dark for her. And she woke up in recovery, and they told her she had a son, but not to get her hopes up, because the chances of him surviving are very low. He's critical. He only weighs 1 pound. He's 3 months early. He probably will not make it. And so there's a picture. I wish I had it, but my grandpa showed me this picture of me after I was born, and I fit in his palm. I was that tiny. And so I was literally only 1 pound. And they said that, he won't make it, but so don't get your hopes up. But I did. The odds were stacked against me from the very beginning. In that moment, it was a tough thing for my mom to go through, but she held on to a promise. And that didn't mean for her that everything was going to just be perfect right away and everything was going to work out perfectly right away. We still very much went through a process, even though we had a word. And so the odds were against her from us from the start. I was 1 pound. I was covered in some, I don't know how to say the word, so I'm not even going to try to attempt, but it's a hair that's on the baby while they're in the uterus. I was covered in that when I was born.
Is it meconium?
Something like that.
Yeah.
But it's supposed to fall off.
Yeah, and that's normal. I mean, we had hairy babies, and then it just comes right off. Really quick.
And so, but I was covered in it. Like every, I look like a little, we make jokes because one of our first episodes were about monkeys, and I looked like one of those research monkeys. It just was really tiny and covered in hair. And the problem that they were facing while I was in, critical care was that my body didn't know how to breathe on its own. And so my brain didn't tell my lungs what to do. And without intervention, I would have just stopped breathing and died. And so the doctors did something, which I always thought this was a joke from my mom. They prescribed me caffeine drops as a 1 pound, 3 month early preemie. And that's what kept my heart going.
I knew caffeine was a gift from God.
Yeah.
Knew it.
And everyone laughs today because I drink a lot of coffee. I drink a lot of energy drinks. I drink a lot of, caffeine, and so it's funny, but that's what kept my brain and my heart going in those very early moments.
Well, the lungs are the last organs to develop in the babies. And that's why they're so critical when there's a premature birth. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so that's the situation we were in. They prescribed me that to stimulate my brain to keep me alive, and so that my body could learn how to breathe on its own. And so for weeks, she sat by my side in the NICU, and she just told me she would pray over me, and she would just keep talking to God and tell him, I made you a promise. He's yours. He's here, and he's yours. And I believe that you have a purpose for his life. Otherwise, he wouldn't be here. And I wouldn't be here. And so she told me she's just kept holding on to that promise over the years. And fast forward a little bit, we went through, a lot of changes throughout my childhood. But just 3 months after leaving the hospital, in our town of Fritch, Texas, which is near Borger, Texas, in Amarillo, 3 Texas tornado twisters hit our family ranch in a row. And there's like newspaper articles of the 92 Fritch tornadoes. And it completely devastated our town. And in that small, we lived, it was like a biblical family situation. We had multiple generations living in one ranch. And so, we all lived in this ranch. My dad and my grandpa were truck drivers. And so they were away at this time. And my aunt, my uncle, and my mom, and my grandma, my sisters and cousins were all in this house together when these tornadoes started to touch down. And I don't remember, I was just a baby, but I remember the story being told that when they found out that these tornadoes were coming, they were the worst tornadoes in the area to that date. And there was no basement in our ranch. And so we all piled in. What do they tell you? If you're, tornadoes coming, where do you go if you don't have a basement? Well, you go to the cellar. Well, if you don't have a cellar, where do you go? You go to the bathroom. And so we piled everybody into this tiny bathroom. And, me and my premature self and my cousins and my sisters were all put in the bathtub. And my mom kind of hovered over us. My grandpa and my dad were away. And so it was my aunt, my mom, my uncle, my grandma, and my cousins and my sisters all in this bathroom. The kids were all in the tub, and my aunt and my mom were hovering over the tub, and my uncle grabbed a mattress and he put it against the door of the bathroom and he just held it. All while the 3 in a row twister tornadoes tore through our town. And I believe 2 of them hit our house. And, when tornadoes hit houses, bad things happen. And so we lost everything. And I was told, and it's almost one of those like, no way stories, but these tornadoes hit our house. And the only thing that was left of that house were the 4 walls of that bathroom. That was the only thing left connected. And we lost everything in those tornadoes, but we survived. And the only thing we recovered, we lost pictures, we lost, all my baby pictures, all of these things. We lost all kinds of family things, but we still had each other. And we found the family Bible. And those were the only 2 things that we had, was our family and the family Bible. And so God kept us. And so I went from this impossible start to this impossible next start. And then, fast forward even further, my parents divorced and they were really young. And my grandparents received, long story short, my grandparents received custody of us, me and my sisters, and we moved here to Ohio. And my grandparents raised us in the church. And all the while, I didn't understand the trajectory God had for my life right away. But I had this incredible testimony already, just, in my youth. Well, yeah, I was only I weighed 1 pound. I remember telling people that, I only weighed 1 pound. I was born 3 months early and tornadoes hit my house. And the teachers would be like, yeah, okay. But it really happened. And so I had this tremendous testimony, and I had a word from my mom. Hey, God's going to use you to do great things. And all while making that transition, living with my grandparents, moving, and being raised in Ravenna, Ohio, leaving Texas, coming here, and a lot of discouragement through just life trials that most people face happen. Growing up, my grandpa was a truck driver. I didn't always have a great relationship with my mom and dad. They weren't always allowed back into my, immediate life. They lived in different areas. And my grandparents raised me, and I have a great relationship with my father and my mother today. I love them dearly, and God's done a really good work in their lives. And so I want to make sure to honor them and not paint them in a negative light. But growing up, I had a lot of things outside of that beginning kind of just discouraged me. And my grandma did the best she could with 6 kids. And I talked about it a little bit earlier, but we were latchkey kids. We walked everywhere. We walked to school. We rode our bikes everywhere. It was a different time. Can't really do that anymore. But we were gone from sun up to sundown, all throughout the town, and we were safe. And my sisters were always with me and my cousins. But I just felt this discouragement from those things that we dealt with. And my grandma did the thing she knew to do, is she just took us to church. this church in Talmadge, which was about 30 minutes away. She faithfully drove us to church every Sunday, 2 times a week, and every Wednesday, and then to every youth event, and then to every Friday night event, and to every potluck, and to all of these things. She would just drive us faithfully. And she raised us in the church. And my grandpa raised us in the church. And man, a church is not just a building. And it was a big part of my childhood. And so I got really close with Pastor Bolgren, Ken Bolgren. He's my pastor. And my youth pastor was Josh Carson, who is the dean of a Bible college now. And they were so impactful. They were such a great example and role model to me growing up. And they really poured and invested into me. And that made a huge, huge difference. And it helped me develop this calling that we've talked about a little bit. Having that relationship with them and being brought up in the church was so valuable, and it connected me to like-minded people and to mentors that really stepped up and were a big part of my life and kind of helped me develop into who I am today. And I believe the word my mom was given, that God was going to do great things with us. And fortunately, got married in 2014. We got married. I've been married for 10 years now. I have 2 little girls of my own. God's kept us through. I keep hitting that. God's kept us, in our marriage, and we're privileged. My wife and I both work at our church, and we're both teachers. I help with youth ministry and all these things. And so God did have a plan, and it didn't ever go the way I thought it would go.
Never does.
And it never does. And we've faced trials after trials after trials, but God had a word. There's a scripture that I kind of live by. It's Jeremiah 29:11. And this is the word. It said, for I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you, a great future. And man, I live by that because I've seen it. God will sometimes give a word and your circumstance might not match up with that word, but he'll see you through it. And his ways are higher than our ways. We know that. And it's been really cool to see, through the highs and lows, that God's always been there and he's always had a plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What a great story. And you're right about that, is that life's hard. It's really hard. Yep. And everybody's got something that they're dealing with or dealt with or is getting ready to go through or something. And leaning on God is the only sure thing that we have, is by leaning on him and get into his word and find it. And even and especially when things don't go the way we think they should or the way we want them to, we have to remember that God's plan for us is far bigger than our plans for us and better. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Guys, what a great story. I know we're past our time here, but I didn't want to interrupt you because it's just a great story from both of you. And so we got Sean Delaney and Charlie Griffin here from the Casting Faith podcast. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. Before we go, tell the listeners how they can find you on the podcast and social media and however else you want to be reached.
Yeah, you can find us at the Casting Faith podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Spotify,
YouTube,
Apple, everywhere you listen to podcasts. On Instagram, I'm Sean SEAN __ Delaney, and
you're a double underscore.
Yeah, the single underscore was taken. So.
Okay. Yeah, so there's more than one of you that spell your name wrong. We got it.
There you go.
You can find me. Casting Faith podcast is our Instagram tag. That's where you can find us. And I don't know my tag off the top of my head, but it's connected to that one. So if you follow us there, okay. I also, we're out of time, but I did write a book this year. And so that's a new work for me. It's called Be Like Barnabas, Sons of Encouragement. It's all about encouraging and becoming an encourager. It's a devotional. It's found on Amazon. So if you type in Be Like Barnabas by Charles Griffin, you'll find it. So
Charles.
Yeah, well, I'm a yeah, that's another. We got it. We don't have time.
The full name Charles?
Yeah.
Hey, Wes. I mean, even because Pete's my nickname. I'm not going to tell you what my real name is. And even when I
guess.
I published my name under Pete because nobody knows who my real name is.
Yeah.
Right. So that's cool. Be Like Barnabas is the book by Charles Griffin, the Cast of Faith podcast. Guys, thank you so much for joining me here on Christian Outdoors.
Thank you.